Welcome to this clinical masterclass explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the thermodynamics of cosmic engineering, and we're going to map out the highly precise timeline of the 2026 nuclear dust retrieval mission. Now, if you're a focused learner looking to just bypass all the noise and really understand the mechanics of how macrosystemic events unfold, well, you're in the exact right place. We aren't looking at historical shifts through the lens of human emotion or bias today. No, we're looking at strict, scientifically precise data. Okay, so here's our sequential agenda for today. First, the foundational science of Asha. Second, dynamic laws versus static dogma. And finally, we'll meticulously track 3 precise dates of the 2026 timeline: May 16th, May 26th, and July 4th. Section 1, the science of Asha. Before we actually analyze the timeline of 2026, let's establish our theoretical framework. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding Asha not as some sort of mysticism, but as an ancient, highly analytical science of cosmic order. When we talk about Asha in this explainer, we're referring to a clinical discipline. It's essentially a form of cosmic engineering that utilizes planetary thermodynamics to map out how massive, overarching systems either function, adapt, or eventually collapse. Think of it like a structural blueprint for the flow of energy across time and space. If you've ever wondered why massive geopolitical cycles just seem to repeat like clockwork, well, this is the underlying math. And this framework treats planetary movements completely objectively. In the science of Asha, planetary cycles operate as literal thermodynamic triggers. It's exactly like how pressure builds in a fault line until it absolutely must release. Geopolitical and structural energies build up within human civilization in the exact same way. When planetary movements hit precise, mathematical degrees, they act as the catalyst, forcing a necessary and frankly inevitable discharge of that pent-up energy. They interact directly with human geopolitics, completely overriding any human attempt to artificially contain them. All right, moving on to Section 2, dynamic laws versus static dogma. This is where the thermodynamics actually meet human structures on the ground. Now here we see a really fascinating objective contrast. On one side, you have the inevitable dynamic planetary laws, that flow of cosmic order that absolutely demands energy must move and discharge. On the opposite side is what our source material analyzes as failing static dogma, specifically citing the Mahdi philosophy. From a purely clinical perspective, the source frames this as the classic immovable object attempting to defy an unstoppable force. According to this framework, a static system that tries to resist the natural thermodynamic flow of energy will, mathematically speaking, face an overwhelming structural crisis when those dynamic laws trigger a release. And just to be clear, we aren't taking sides here, we're simply observing the physics of how a static system reacts to intense dynamic pressure, strictly based on the source data. And this brilliantly illustrates our clinical case study for today. This 3-step sequential timeline maps out the nuclear dust retrieval mission, showing us exactly when the thermodynamic pressure against these static systems is going to hit critical mass. We've got an ignition, an unplugging, and a final discharge. Which brings us to Section 3, May 16th, the ignition. Let's examine the first thermodynamic trigger in this sequence, the actual event that sets the entire 2026 cycle into motion. The date is May 16th, 2026, and the absolutely critical data point is exactly 28 degrees. This represents the precise moment the geocentric tropical Mars cycle hits exactly 28 degrees Aries. Listen, this isn't some vague, general time frame. It's a point of acute scientific precision. When geocentric Mars reaches that exact 28-degree mark in Aries, it acts as the primary thermodynamic trigger. I want you to think of it like the spark hitting the fuel line. This precise planetary position initiates the systemic ignition of the 2026 conflict. Those static dogmatic systems we discussed earlier, well, they're going to experience their first massive surge of uncontainable energy here. The thermodynamic discharge is officially set into motion on this exact date. Section 4, May 26th. Infrastructure unplugging. Exactly 10 days later, we reach the second critical phase of the mission. The pressure has been ignited, and now we see the structural response. Let's move forward and see how this builds. On May 26th, the planetary geometry shifts to a Mars-Pluto square. Notice how the corresponding thermodynamic action is classified as an infrastructure unplugging. That is a highly rapid escalation from the initial ignition just 10 days prior. But what does this actually mean clinically? Well, it literally means a structural unplugging of static infrastructure. When a dogmatic system rigidly attempts to hold on to power and resist the dynamic flow of cosmic energy, the resulting thermodynamic friction just breaks the system down entirely. The Mars-Pluto square represents an inevitable tearing away of the foundational wiring that holds those static systems together. Again, viewing this purely analytically according to our framework, systems that refuse to adapt are quite simply unplugged from the energetic grid to allow the necessary cosmic energy to flow. Section 5, July 4th, Final Discharge. Finally, we reach the climax of the retrieval mission. The structural resistance has been dismantled, paving the way for the ultimate conclusion of this cycle. The data shows that the July 4th event, characterized by the extremely precise Mars-Uranus conjunction, acts as the final necessary discharge of energy. We followed the sequence all the way from the ignition at 28 degrees Aries, right through the unplugging during the Mars-Pluto square, and it all inevitably leads us to this highly volatile alignment. This date marks the point where the entire nuclear dust retrieval mission finally achieves its required thermodynamic discharge. The overarching system has fully corrected itself. The ancient science of Asha perfectly maps this whole thing out. The built-up energetic pressure of geopolitical stasis and rigid dogma is forcefully and completely cleared out. Ultimately, the cosmic engineering mission is fundamentally about ensuring this necessary balance is restored, removing those static blocks so the universal system can breathe and function properly once more. This clinical mapping of 2026 leaves us with a truly profound reality to consider. We've seen the data, we've tracked the thermodynamic triggers, and we've analyzed the totally unstoppable nature of these planetary cycles. So I'll leave you with this final question to genuinely think about. In a universe mathematically governed by these dynamic planetary laws, can any static human dogma ultimately survive the inevitable, overwhelming flow of cosmic energy? Thank you so much for joining me for this masterclass explainer. I highly encourage you to reflect on these underlying systems as we approach these critical dates. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.